The vast emptiness of space stretched out before the Crax battle fleet. Thousands of alien ships, each as big as a city, moved together like a swarm of angry bees. At the head of this mighty force was the flagship Deathbringer. Its name wasn't just for show. It had destroyed entire planets. On the bridge of the Deathbringer, Commander Glix stood tall and proud. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he looked at the star map. A thin smile spread across his face, showing rows of sharp teeth. At last, Glix said, his voice low and dangerous, "We found them. The humans won't know what hit them." One of Glix's officers approached, bowing low. "Commander, we've confirmed the location of the human colony. It's called New Sol." Glix nodded. "Excellent. How long until we arrive?" 3 standard rotations, sir." "Perfect. Prepare the fleet for battle. I want every ship ready to attack as soon as we drop out of hyperspace." As the officer hurried away, Glix turned back to the star map. His eyes focused on a small blue-green dot, the human colony world. It looked so small, so weak. Glix couldn't understand how these humans had managed to spread so far into space in such a short time. The Crax Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. They were strong, technologically advanced, and ruthless. When they first encountered humans just 50 years ago, they had laughed. These soft, pink creatures seemed no threat at all. But then, something unexpected happened. The humans fought back, and they were good at it. In battle after battle, human ships had held their own against the Crax. Sometimes, they even won. It made no sense. The Crax had better weapons, stronger shields, and more advanced technology. Yet somehow, these humans always found a way to survive. Glix growled softly. "This ends now," he thought. "We'll crush their colony and show them once and for all who rules this galaxy." Meanwhile, on the other side of the star system, a small human fleet gathered. Compared to the massive Crax armada, it looked like a group of toy boats next to a giant cruise ship. But looks can be deceiving. Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Dauntless. She was old for a human, with gray hair and wrinkles around her eyes. But those eyes were sharp and full of fire. "Status report," she barked. A young officer named Kim replied. "All ships are in position, Admiral. The colony's defenses are at full strength. We've also received word that it's on its way." Admiral Lee nodded, a small smile on her face. "Good. Let's hope it gets here in time." She turned to look out the view screen at the assembled fleet. It wasn't much, a handful of cruisers, some frigates, and a swarm of fighter craft. But every ship was crewed by brave men and women ready to give their lives to protect their new home. "Admiral," Kim said, his voice tight with worry, "do you really think we can win this? The Crax fleet, it's huge." Lee turned to face the young officer. Her eyes were hard, but there was a glimmer of hope in them too. "Size isn't everything, Kim. Remember your history. How many times have humans faced seemingly impossible odds? How many times have we been outnumbered, outgunned, and still come out on top?" Kim nodded slowly. "But this is different. We're not just fighting for a city or a country. We're fighting for our entire species." "Exactly," Lee said. "And that's why we'll win. Because we have to. Because the alternative is extinction. And let me tell you something, Kim. Humans don't go extinct easily." Just then, an alarm blared across the bridge. Kim rushed to his console, his fingers flying over the controls. "Admiral, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. The Crax fleet. They're here." Lee's face hardened. This was it. The moment they had all been preparing for. She took a deep breath and straightened her uniform. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice calm and steady. "All ships prepare to engage, and send the signal. It's time to show these aliens what humanity is really capable of." As the human fleet moved into defensive positions around New Sol, the first Crax ships began to appear. One by one, Then, in groups, massive alien warships dropped out of hyperspace. Soon, the sky was filled with them, blocking out the stars. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin. And unknown to the Crax, the humans had an ace up their sleeve, one that would make the aliens question everything they thought they knew about warfare. Far from the brewing battle, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant, a lone human ship floated silently. This wasn't just any ship. It was humanity's best-kept secret, their trump card in the war against the Crax. Its name was Thunderbolt, and it was unlike anything ever built before. On the bridge of Thunderbolt, Captain Jae-sung paced back and forth. He was young for a captain, barely in his 30s, with short black hair and intense eyes. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. "Status report," Jae-sung said, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. His first officer, Yuma, spoke up. "All systems are green, Captain. HFY is fully operational and ready for her first real test." HFY was the ship's artificial intelligence, more advanced than any AI ever created. She was the heart and brain of Thunderbolt. Without her, the ship would be just another piece of metal floating in space. "Thank you, Yuma," Jae-sung said. He turned to face a holographic display that showed a woman's face. "HFY, what's your assessment of the situation?" The face smiled. When HFY spoke, her voice was smooth and calming. "Based on current data, Captain, the Crax fleet outnumbers our forces by approximately 20 to 1. However, with Thunderbolt's capabilities, I calculate our chances of victory at 63.7%. Jae-sung nodded. Those weren't great odds, but they were better than he'd expected. He thought back to the day, just 2 years ago, when he'd been chosen for this mission. It had been a normal day at the Space Academy. Jae-sung was teaching a class on advanced tactics when Admiral Lee herself walked in. The room fell silent as she approached him. "Captain Kim," she'd said, using his rank at the time, "I have a proposition for you. It's dangerous, probably suicidal, but if it works, you'll save humanity." Of course, he'd said yes. How could he not? The next day, he was introduced to the Thunderbolt project. He met the scientists who had pushed the boundaries of physics to create her, the engineers who had built her in secret, and HFY, the AI who would become his partner in this crazy mission. Now, 2 years later, here they were, about to face an alien armada with a ship that, in theory, could change the course of the war. In theory. Jae-sung's thoughts were interrupted by HFY's voice. "Captain, I'm detecting weapons fire. The battle has begun." He took a deep breath. This was it. "All right, people. This is what we've trained for. HFY, begin power-up sequence. Yuma, prepare for hyperspace jump. Let's go save humanity." The crew burst into action. Lights flickered as massive amounts of energy surged through the ship. Thunderbolt hummed to life, systems activating one by one. As they prepared to jump into the fray, Jae-sung thought about the Crax. The aliens thought they knew everything about human technology. They thought this battle would be easy. They had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, back at New Seoul, the battle raged. Human ships darted between the massive Crax vessels, using their smaller size and greater maneuverability to avoid enemy fire. But it wasn't enough. Slowly but surely, the aliens were pushing through their defenses. In her fighter, Lieutenant Soo-min gritted her teeth as she barrel-rolled away from an enemy laser. Her squadron was doing its best, but there were just too many Crax ships. "Thunder Squadron, form up on me," she called over the comm. "We're going to try to take out one of their cruisers." "But sir," one of her pilots responded, "our weapons can barely dent their shields." "I know," Soo-min said, "but we have to try. For Earth, for New Seoul, for all of humanity." As Soo-min led her squadron on what might be a suicide run, Admiral Lee watched from the bridge of the Dauntless. The situation was grim. They were losing ships fast, and the colony's shields were starting to fail. "Where is it?" she muttered. "Come on, Jae-sung. We need you." Just then, a junior officer called out, "Admiral, we're detecting a massive energy spike." Lee's heart leaped. Could it be? "Where?" she demanded. It's right in the middle of the Crax fleet." A smile spread across Lee's face. Well, she said. "Looks like the party's about to really get started." In the heart of the Crax armada, space itself seemed to twist and tear. A hole opened up, crackling with energy. And out of that hole came a ship unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Thunderbolt had arrived, and the real battle was about to begin. The space around New Sewell lit up with explosions. Laser beams and plasma bolts crisscrossed the darkness. Human and Crax ships danced a deadly dance amid the chaos. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Glix watched with growing frustration. The battle wasn't going as smoothly as he had expected. Yes, his forces were winning, but the humans were putting up a surprisingly strong fight. "Status report," Glix barked. An officer quickly responded. "We've destroyed 30% of their fleet, sir, but our losses are higher than expected." Glix's 4 eyes narrowed. "How much higher?" The officer hesitated before answering. "We've lost 15% of our ships, sir." Glix couldn't believe it. How were these primitive humans causing so much damage? It didn't make sense. But it didn't matter. Victory was still certain. It was just taking longer than he'd hoped. "Press the attack," Glix ordered. "I want that colony's shields down now." As the Crax ships intensified their assault, the human defenders fought desperately to hold the line. Among them was Lieutenant Sumin, leading her fighter squadron against impossible odds. "Thunder 3, watch your 6. Sumin shouted into her comm as she saw a Crax fighter lining up behind one of her pilots. She quickly flipped her own fighter around and fired a burst from her laser cannons. The alien ship exploded in a bright flash. "Thanks, lead," came the relieved voice of Thunder 3. Sumin allowed herself a small smile, but it didn't last long. For every Crax fighter they shot down, 3 more seemed to take its place. Her squadron was down to half strength, and they were all running low on fuel and ammo. Just then, her comm crackled to life. It was Admiral Lee's voice, broadcasting to all ships. "Attention all forces, fall back to defensive position Gamma. I repeat, fall back to defensive position Gamma." Sumin frowned. Gamma was their last line of defense before the colony itself. If they were falling back that far, things must be really bad. "You heard the Admiral," Sumin told her squadron. "Let's go, people. We're not done yet." As the human ships regrouped, the Crax pressed their advantage. Their massive warships moved forward, their weapons blazing. The colony's shields flickered under the assault. On the Dauntless, Admiral Lee watched the battle unfold with a grim expression. The situation was dire, but she wasn't out of tricks yet. "Status on Thunderbolt?" she asked. Her comm officer replied, "They've engaged the enemy, Admiral. But it's strange. They're not firing weapons. They're just moving." Lee nodded. "Good. Tell all ships to hold position, and get me a visual on Thunderbolt." A holographic display flickered to life, showing a view of the battle. In the midst of the chaos, a single human ship darted between the massive Crax vessels. It moved in ways that seemed impossible, changing direction instantly, sometimes seeming to be in 2 places at once. "What in the world?" muttered Lee's first officer. "How are they doing that?" Lee allowed herself a small smile. "That, my friend, is the future of warfare." Meanwhile, on Thunderbolt, Captain Jae-sung and his crew were fighting the battle of their lives. But it didn't look like any battle ever fought before. "ARIA, status report," Jae-sung called out as the ship performed another seemingly impossible maneuver. The AI's calm voice replied, "All systems functioning at optimal levels, Captain. Quantum drive is stable. We've successfully confused 38% of the Crax fleet's targeting systems." Jae-sung nodded. Thunderbolt's secret weapon wasn't its firepower. It was its mobility. Thanks to its advanced quantum drive, the ship could manipulate space-time itself, allowing it to move in ways that defied conventional physics. "Good work, Araya," Jae-sung said. "Let's step it up. Activate Phase 2. "Acknowledged, Captain," Araya responded. Initiating quantum field expansion. Suddenly, Thunderbolt seemed to blur. Multiple images of the ship appeared, each one moving independently. To the Crax sensors, it looked like a single ship had suddenly become a dozen. On his flagship, Commander Glick stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "What is this trickery?" he roared. "How are they doing this?" His officers had no answers. They had never seen anything like this before. The strange human ship was causing chaos throughout the fleet. Crax ships were firing at empty space, or worse, at each other, fooled by the quantum illusions. For the first time since the battle began, a seed of doubt began to grow in Glick's mind. What if they had underestimated these humans? What if this wasn't going to be the easy victory he had promised his superiors? As Thunderbolt continued its dance through the Crax fleet, the tide of battle slowly began to turn. The humans had hope again, and the aliens were about to learn a harsh lesson about the dangers of underestimating humanity. The battle raged on around New Seoul. The sky was filled with flashes of light from exploding ships and weapon fire. In the middle of this chaos, Thunderbolt danced. Captain Jae-sung stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the battle. His ship moved in ways that seemed impossible, leaving confused Crax ships in its wake. "RIA," Jae-sung called out. "How are we doing?" The AI's calm voice filled the bridge. "We're operating at 85% efficiency, Captain. The Crax are having significant difficulty targeting us. However, they are adapting." Jae-sung nodded. He had expected this. The Crax weren't stupid. They would figure out a way to counter Thunderbolt's tricks eventually. "It's time for the next phase," he said. "Prepare the quantum torpedoes." These weren't ordinary weapons. Like Thunderbolt itself, the quantum torpedoes used advanced technology to bend the rules of physics. They could phase through shields and armor, exploding inside enemy ships. As Thunderbolt prepared its secret weapons, the rest of the human fleet rallied. Admiral Lee's voice came over the comm system, strong and clear. "All ships, this is Admiral Lee. Thunderbolt has given us an opening. It's time to push back. Hit them with everything we've got." Across the battlefield, human ships responded. Cruisers fired their main guns. Frigates launched missiles, and fighters, led by Lieutenant Sumin, dove into the fray. Sumin's voice crackled over the radio. "Thunder Squadron, form up on me. We're going to give Thunderbolt some cover." Her fighters fell into formation around the larger ship. They were tiny compared to Thunderbolt, but their presence made a difference. They shot down Crax fighters that got too close and drew fire away from the bigger ship. Inside his flagship, Commander Glick was furious. His perfectly planned attack was falling apart because of one human ship. "I want that ship destroyed," he roared. "Bring all weapons to bear on it. I don't care about anything else. Just destroy that ship." Crax ships began to focus their fire on Thunderbolt. Energy beams and plasma bolts filled the space around the human vessel. But hitting it was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. On Thunderbolt's bridge, alarms began to sound. The ship shook as near misses buffeted it. "Captain," Araya reported, "our quantum field is under strain. We can't keep this up indefinitely." Jae-sung's face was grim. "Understood. It's time to show them what we can really do. Araya, target the Crax flagship. Fire quantum torpedoes." Outside, Thunderbolt seemed to shimmer. Then suddenly, streaks of blue light shot out from it. These were the quantum torpedoes. They moved in ways that didn't make sense, zigzagging and even seeming to disappear and reappear. The Crax tried to shoot them down, but it was useless. The torpedoes phased right through their shields and armor. On his flagship, Glix had just enough time to realize what was happening before the torpedoes struck. There was no explosion on the outside of the ship. Instead, multiple explosions ripped through the inside of the massive vessel. Glix was thrown to the floor as his ship shuddered. Alarms blared and smoke filled the bridge. He looked around in disbelief. How had the humans done this? Back on Thunderbolt, Jae-sung watched as the Crax flagship began to break apart. Direct hit, Araya confirmed. The Crax flagship is severely damaged. Their fleet formation is breaking down. A cheer went up from the crew. But Jae-sung knew the battle wasn't over yet. There were still hundreds of Crax ships out there. Good work, everyone, he said. But let's not celebrate too early. Araya, prepare for another attack run. As Thunderbolt moved back into the fight, the mood across the human fleet had changed. Where before there had been desperation, now there was hope. The impossible ship had turned the tide of battle. On the Dauntless, Admiral Lee allowed herself a small smile. Well done, Jae-sung, she murmured. Then, louder, to her crew. Push the attack. The Crax are on the back foot. Let's show them what happens when they mess with humanity. The battle for New Seoul was far from over. But for the first time since the Crax arrived, it looked like the humans might actually win. And it was all thanks to one ship that defied the laws of physics and the brave crew that flew her. As Thunderbolt prepared for its next attack, the Crax fleet fell into disarray. The aliens were about to learn a hard lesson. Never underestimate human ingenuity. The space around New Seoul was a mess of broken ships and debris. The Crax fleet, once proud and unstoppable, was now in chaos. But the battle was far from over. On what remained of his flagship's bridge, Commander Glix pulled himself to his feet. He was hurt, angry, and most of all, confused. How had the humans done this? It didn't matter. He wouldn't let his people be defeated by these primitive apes. Status report, he barked. A junior officer, his uniform torn and dirty, answered, Commander, we've lost a third of our fleet. The flagship's main weapons are offline. The humans are pushing us back on all fronts. Glix's 4 eyes narrowed. And the human supership? It's still out there, sir. Our weapons can't touch it. Glix thought hard. There had to be a way to beat this thing. Then, an idea struck him. If they couldn't destroy it, maybe they could trap it. Send word to all remaining ships, Glix ordered. I want every gravity generator we have focused on that human vessel. If we can't shoot it down, we'll crush it with its own weight. As the Crax fleet regrouped, Thunderbolt continued its assault, but something was wrong. On the bridge, Captain Jae-sung felt the ship shudder. Araya, what's happening? He asked. The A's voice wasn't as calm as usual when she answered. Captain, the Crax are using their gravity weapons against us. Our quantum field is destabilizing. Jae-sung's heart sank. The quantum field was what allowed Thunderbolt to perform its impossible maneuvers. Without it, they were just another ship. Can we break free? He asked. Negative, Captain, Araya replied. The gravitational forces are too strong. Our engines are at maximum, but we're not moving. Outside, Thunderbolt was caught in a web of invisible forces. Dozens of Crax ships surrounded it, their gravity generators focused on the human vessel. Slowly but surely, they were crushing it. Lieutenant Sumin saw what was happening from her fighter. Thunder Squadron, the Big T is in trouble. We need to take out those alien ships. Her fighters dove towards the Crax vessels, guns blazing. But there were too many. For every ship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. On the Dauntless, Admiral Lee watched the situation with growing concern. Thunderbolt was their best hope for winning this battle. If they lost it now, all ships, focus fire on the Crax vessels surrounding Thunderbolt, she ordered. We need to free our ace. The human fleet responded, pouring fire into the Crax ships. But the aliens held their ground. They knew that if they could destroy this one human ship, victory would be theirs. Inside Thunderbolt, warning alarms blared. The ship groaned under the immense pressure. Hull integrity at 60% and falling, Araya reported. Captain, we can't withstand this much longer. Jae-sung's mind raced. They needed a way out, and fast. Then he had an idea. It was crazy, possibly suicidal, but it might just work. Araya, can we still fire our quantum torpedoes? He asked. Affirmative, Captain. But in our current state, the torpedoes would likely detonate as soon as they leave the ship. Jae-sung nodded. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Prepare all remaining quantum torpedoes. Set them to detonate the moment they're launched. The eye was silent for a moment. Captain, that course of action has a high probability of causing severe damage to Thunderbolt. I know, Jae-sung said grimly. But if we don't do something, we're dead anyway. Sometimes you have to roll a hard 6. As Thunderbolt prepared its desperate move, the battle raged on around it. Human and Crax ships clashed in a furious dance of death. The fate of New Sol, and possibly the entire human race, hung in the balance. Commander Glix watched with grim satisfaction as the human supership was slowly crushed. Victory was within his grasp. Soon, the human defenses would crumble and New Sol would fall. But Glix had made a critical mistake. He had forgotten one of the most important rules of warfare. Never corner a desperate enemy. As the pressure on Thunderbolt reached critical levels, Jae-sung gave the order. Fire all torpedoes. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, suddenly, multiple explosions blossomed around Thunderbolt. The quantum torpedoes, detonating as soon as they left the ship, created a massive shockwave. The Crax ships closest to Thunderbolt were vaporized instantly. Those further away were thrown back, their gravity generators overloaded and destroyed. And in the center of it all, battered but unbroken, was Thunderbolt. The tide of battle had turned once again. But at what cost? And could the humans press their advantage before the Crax recovered? The battle for New Sol had entered its final desperate phase. The explosion from Thunderbolt's quantum torpedoes lit up space like a new star. For a moment, both human and Crax forces paused, stunned by the massive blast. As the light faded, everyone looked for Thunderbolt. Had the brave ship survived its own desperate attack? At first, there was nothing, just debris and fading energy readings. Then suddenly, a shape emerged from the chaos. Battered, scorched, but still intact, Thunderbolt floated free. On the bridge, Captain Jae-sung coughed as smoke cleared from the air. Status report, he called out, his voice hoarse. Araya's voice came through, slightly distorted but functional. Hull integrity at 40%, Captain. Weapons systems offline. Quantum drive severely damaged. But we're alive. Jae-sung allowed himself a small smile. Good work, Araya. Now, let's finish this fight. Meanwhile, on the Crax flagship, Commander Glix stared at his displays in disbelief. How had the humans survived that? It should have been impossible. An officer approached him, looking nervous. Commander, we've lost a quarter of our remaining ships to that blast. The rest are in disarray. We're losing, sir. Glix's 4 eyes narrowed in anger. He wouldn't accept defeat. Not like this. Not to humans. Prepare my personal fighter, he growled. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. Back on the Dauntless, Admiral Lee watched as Thunderbolt broke free. She felt a surge of pride for Jae-sung and his crew. But the battle wasn't over yet. All ships, this is Admiral Lee, she broadcast. Thunderbolt has given us an opening. Let's make it count. Push forward. For Earth and New Sol. The human fleet responded with a cheer. Ships that had been on the defensive now pressed forward, emboldened by Thunderbolt's miraculous survival. Lieutenant Sumin led her fighter squadron in a daring attack run. Thunder Squadron, form up on me, she called out. We're going to clear a path for our big ships. Her fighters dove into the midst of the Crax fleet, guns blazing. They were outnumbered, but not outmatched. Human pilots proved their skill. outmaneuvering the alien ships at every turn. As the battle raged, Thunderbolt drifted, its crew working frantically to get systems back online. Jae-sung knew they weren't out of danger yet. "RIA, what's our status on the quantum drive?" he asked. "Quantum drive is at 15% capacity, Captain," the AI replied. "We can make small jumps, but nothing like our previous maneuvers." Jae-sung nodded. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. "All right, let's use what we have. Plot me a course right through the heart of the Crax fleet." Just then, a new contact appeared on their sensors. A single Crax fighter, moving faster than any they'd seen before, was heading straight for them. On board that fighter, Commander Glix gripped his controls tightly. He had one goal: destroy the human supership, even if it cost him his life. As Glix's fighter closed in, Thunderbolt prepared for its final gambit. With a flicker of energy, the human ship disappeared, only to reappear a short distance away. Then it vanished again, reappearing somewhere else. Glix snarled in frustration. Even damaged, the human ship was hard to hit, but he wouldn't give up. He followed Thunderbolt's erratic course, firing whenever he had a shot. Inside Thunderbolt, the crew held on as their ship jumped from point to point. Each jump drained more power from their damaged systems. "Captain, we can't keep this up," Araya warned. "One more jump at most before the quantum drive fails completely." Jae-sung nodded grimly. "Then we make it count. Araya, calculate the exact center of the Crax fleet. That's where we're going." With its last burst of energy, Thunderbolt made one final jump. It appeared right in the middle of the Crax armada, surrounded on all sides by enemy ships. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The Crax ships, surprised by Thunderbolt's sudden appearance, hesitated to fire, afraid of hitting their own. Glix, still in pursuit, saw his chance. He aimed his fighter directly at Thunderbolt, ready to ram it if necessary. But Jae-sung had one last trick up his sleeve. "RIA, initiate Omega Protocol." Suddenly, Thunderbolt began to glow. Energy readings spiked off the charts. The ship's quantum drive, pushed beyond its limits, was about to overload. Glix realized the danger too late. He tried to veer away, but he was too close. With a final burst of energy, Thunderbolt's quantum drive exploded. But this was no ordinary explosion. It created a localized quantum anomaly, a bubble of warped space-time. The Crax ships caught in the anomaly began to twist and break apart, crushed by forces they couldn't understand. Glix's fighter was the first to go, vaporized in an instant. As the anomaly expanded, it tore through the heart of the Crax fleet. Ship after ship was destroyed or crippled. And at the center of it all, protected by the varied forces it had unleashed, Thunderbolt emerged unscathed. The battle wasn't over, but in that moment, everyone knew. Humanity had won. Against all odds, human ingenuity had triumphed over alien might. As cheers erupted across the human fleet, Jae-sung allowed himself to relax for the first time since the battle began. They had done it. They had saved New Seoul, and maybe the entire human race. The Crax would think twice before underestimating humanity again. The space around New Seoul was quiet. The great battle was over. Broken ships, both human and Crax, floated silently. In the distance, the blue-green planet shone, safe and unarmed. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Admiral Lee looked out at the aftermath. She felt tired but proud. They had won, against all odds. "Status report," she said softly. Her first officer replied, "The Crax fleet is in full retreat. Admiral, we've won." Lee nodded. "And our losses?" "Heavy, ma'am. We lost about half our fleet, but it could have been much worse." Lee thought of all the brave men and women who had given their lives. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten. "What about Thunderbolt?" she asked. "Still in one piece, amazingly. Captain Jae-sung is requesting permission to dock for repairs." A small smile crossed Lee's face. Permission granted. Tell Jae-sung I want to see him as soon as he's aboard. Meanwhile, on one of the few remaining Crax ships, the alien leaders were in shock. How had they lost? Their fleet had been bigger, stronger, more advanced. It didn't make sense. One of the sub-commanders spoke up. We should regroup, gather more ships, attack again. The others looked at him like he was crazy, and Elder Crax shook his head. No, we underestimated these humans once. We won't make that mistake again. Back on New Seoul, people were coming out of their shelters. They looked up at the sky, hardly daring to believe they were safe. When the news of victory spread, cheers erupted across the planet. In orbit, Thunderbolt limped towards the Dauntless. The ship was battered and scorched, but it had survived. As it docked, crews rushed to begin repairs. Captain Jae-sung stepped onto the Dauntless, his uniform dirty and torn. Admiral Lee was waiting for him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Lee stepped forward and hugged Jae-sung tightly. "You did it," she said. "You crazy fool, you actually did it." Jae-sung smiled tiredly. "We did it, Admiral. All of us." As they walked to the bridge, Lee filled Jae-sung in on what had happened after Thunderbolt's final gambit. "The Crax fleet fell apart after you took out their center," she explained. "Most of them retreated. We captured a few ships and some prisoners." Jae-sung nodded. "What happens now?" Lee's face turned serious. Now we prepare. The Crax will be back, eventually. And there might be other alien races out there. We need to be ready." Over the next few weeks, the consequences of the battle became clear. News of the human victory spread across the galaxy. Other alien races, who had been watching the conflict, were shocked. The Crax Empire, once the most feared power in this part of the galaxy, was humbled. They sent diplomats to Earth, asking for peace talks. It was a new era for both species. Humans, once seen as primitive newcomers to the galactic stage, were now respected and feared. Thunderbolt's technology was studied and replicated. Soon, every human ship would have quantum drives and torpedoes. But with their new status came new responsibilities. Other races, tired of Crax oppression, looked to humans for protection. Earth found itself the center of a growing alliance of planets. Admiral Lee, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, stood in front of a group of human and alien diplomats. She was about to sign a treaty creating the Galactic Defense Coalition. Before she signed, she spoke to the group. "Today marks a new chapter in galactic history," she said. "We've learned that we're stronger together than apart. Human, Crax, or any other race, we all share this galaxy. It's time we started acting like it." As Lee signed the treaty, Captain Jae-sung watched from the side. He thought about everything that had happened. One ship, one battle had changed the course of history. An alien diplomat approached Jae-sung. "Your ship," the alien said. "It was impressive. We didn't think humans could do such things." Jae-sung smiled. "That's the thing about humans," he said. "We're always full of surprises." As the diplomats mingled, Jae-sung looked out a window at the stars. Out there, he knew, were more adventures, more challenges. But whatever the galaxy threw at them, he was confident that humanity would be ready. After all, they had already proven that even the mightiest alien fleet was no match for human ingenuity and determination. The future was bright, and the stars were waiting. Humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning.